So you just bought a brand new Whipple, VMP, or you're putting on a ported Eden onto your Terminator, and you're all excited, you take it out of the box, you're all ready to go. But it's not quite as simple as that. There are a lot of things that you need to buy ahead of time, or I should say things that you should buy ahead of time to make doing this install easier, where you won't run into problems later on, because there's a lot of things that you need to replace. Things that you should replace while you're there just because, and some very important factors to consider when doing this, and I'll get into all of that. I'll put screenshots of the parts that I'm going to mention up as I'm doing the video, but I'll also have everything linked down in the description below. Before we get too far into the video, I would appreciate it if you leave the video a like or sub down below. Subbing's absolutely free, and if you like Terminator Cobra stuff, there's a lot more stuff coming later on this summer. So it's a new blower install day, and you're all excited to get that Eden off and put on whatever blower that you got for it. What you're putting on doesn't matter. And you may be thinking, why am I doing this video 21 years later after people have been swapping blowers on these cars? It's because when I did the Whipple swap on mine, there was a lot of things that came up that I bought for the install, and a lot of things that should be replaced gasket wise, and other bolts that need to be replaced. Now, if you take this to a shop, they may do all these things and they may not. And I also see a lot of comments regarding people still wanting to buy one of these cars all these years later. So it's still relevant now to go over this stuff for people that may still have a Terminator that they haven't blower swapped yet, or people that are still looking to buy one of these cars and plan on doing this even 21 years later. Now I'll throw up some pictures of the install that we did on this here in my garage when my Whipple went on, and I'll also put up the parts, and so you can see the actual part that I'm talking about, and also have, like I said before, a link down in the description for everything that I mentioned here. Now the first thing I want to mention is you're going to want to replace the O-rings on your flow tubes. That's one thing that probably a lot of people don't think of doing, but especially if you have an original Eden car and you've never taken the blower off before, those O-rings are over 20 years old at this point, and you're going to want to buy, there's 2 O-rings on each flow tube, so you'll need 4 total. And when you put those on as well, you want to make sure to lubricate the O-rings, because they have to get pressed into the housing, and if you do that with it completely dry, you could potentially tear that O-ring, and you don't want to do that. Also, not all O-rings are created equal. There are a bunch that I've seen on Amazon that are lower quality from what I've read from other comments on forums and stuff like that. The ones I'm going to link here and show on screen are actual Ford OEM ones that are on the car from the factory. So, and these are sold through National Parts Depot. I would feel a lot better buying O-rings like that instead of a knockoff from Amazon, not knowing where it came from or the overall quality. Now, while we're talking about the flow tubes, you should get a new gasket for the housing that the flow tubes go into. That tears very easy when you take it off the car, and when mine came off, it was beat up pretty bad, just because it was sealed for so long. You separate it off from the housing, off from where it bolts to, and it tears pretty easy. So you're going to want a new one of these gaskets, because if you don't buy one of these, you try to put it all back together and it's leaking, you're going to have problems after that as well. Another part you're going to want to probably replace is a manifold to cylinder head gaskets. You can reuse these, they are reusable, but I decided to just get new ones anyway. These are used on quite a few different modular engines through Ford, so they're pretty readily available. I thought getting these would be kind of tough, but they weren't. I ended up getting one from National Parts Depot, and then I bought another one from a Ford dealership. Long story short, I thought the install was going to be done a lot sooner than it was. I ended up having to drive from Maine, New Hampshire to pick up one of these gaskets, because you need 2, of course. Drove all the way to New Hampshire to get one gasket, come all the way back to end up not doing the install for the Whipple for that weekend. So it was a wasted trip, but it was a good ride with my dog, so it wasn't too bad. Now, one thing you absolutely have to get new ones of is the intercooler bolts. These things are torque to yield. They're one-time use only. If you get all the ones off on the intercooler when you separate it from the Eden supercharger, if you get them all off without breaking them, awesome. you will not get them back on and torque them down without breaking them. They're one-time use only, and I got these through VMP. There are dimensions for what size to get the thread pitch, all that stuff, so you can get them at a local parts store, but I felt a lot better just going to VMP and ordering it through them because it's labeled as actual 0304 Cobra supercharger intercooler bolts. So it was easy. I knew I was getting the right part and I didn't have to worry about it. Also, with these, you have to use red Loctite and make sure to use the correct torque specifications on that. It's very, very little. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there's tons of sources to look up for what the torque spec should be on that. But just don't use the good old guess method and tighten them down because you probably will break. Another gasket that you'll probably want to replace is a lower intake gasket. I believe mine was in pretty good shape when we pulled the blower off and everything, but from what I'm looking at on my laptop, it's 21 bucks, and that's on CJ Pony Parts. So it's worth doing it. It's such a cheap gasket to buy, and you don't have to worry about it leaking. A lot of these gaskets on these cars, it's just good to replace them just because they've been on the car for so long, and it's just going to be really problematic if you try to reuse some of these, and it's just easier to know that they're all brand new and not have to worry about it. You'll get two different answers on this next one, and that's the manifold bolts, where it bolts from the manifold down to the cylinder heads. And a lot of people have said you can reuse these. Some people have said that you can't. It's kind of up to you if you really want to. I did buy new ones, and I had them to put them on that day, and there was 3 of us here all doing different things with the Eaton supercharger and putting the Whipple on, and things got kind of, I want to say, a little bit hectic at one point, and someone ended up grabbing the stock bolts that came off the Eaton and bolted down the Whipple with those ones, and it's perfectly fine. As long as you torque them correctly and don't over tighten them, you're probably not going to break them, but it is recommended that you replace those with new bolts. I've seen plenty of other people that have said they reused them and it was fine. I probably wouldn't reuse them more than once if you happen to take the blower off again, so keep that in mind as well. Now those are the bolts down there that I'm talking about. Those ones that you can replace or should replace, but you can reuse them, but just be very, very careful on how you torque them down. Now, one other part that you should probably replace, because mine fell apart when I took it off, the IAT gasket is another one that you probably want to replace. When I took mine off, it was all falling apart and it wasn't reusable, so you're going to want to buy another one of those too. I ended up buying one of those through a local parts store. I believe it was Advanced Auto that had them in stock, so that's one other part you want to get beforehand as well. So that should just about cover everything that you should get beforehand just to make this install much easier. I don't know if every single shop that works on these cars goes through that as far as buying all this stuff and replacing all of it. They may reuse some of those gaskets that I mentioned, they may not. But if you're doing this at home in your garage, you're going to want to make sure to grab this stuff. And if you do take it to a shop that's doing the blower swap for you, make sure you ask them if they're doing all this stuff as well, because the last thing you want is some leak from an old gasket that was reused when it really shouldn't have been. You can get away with it with some of these gaskets I mentioned, but for the overall cost of what all these added up to, is it worth it just to buy all new stuff? So let me know if you found this video helpful. I got a lot more stuff for the Cobra, what's left of the summer coming up. If you did make it this far in the video, make sure to leave it a like. But above all else, thanks for watching.